Hello everybody, my name is Ethos, and welcome once again to In a Nutshell, and I'm about to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart, Gara. Gara is the next Warframe in my In a Nutshell series. She is, of course, the Glass Warframe, Glass Queen, the Touch of Death, whatever you want to call her. She's a pretty powerful Warframe, and I'll show you what I'm running with her. It's basically her glass weapons of war. The Astella, of course, which is her glass shotgun, the Fusili, which is her glass kind of like dagger throwing, and then the Volnus, which is a glass hammer. This is literally the weapons that were released with her, that people were built around her entire, thematic of glass, which is pretty cool. So, Gara herself is, you probably, if you've been watching my videos, if you watch my live streams, you probably know she is my absolute favorite Warframe in the world. And the reason for that is because of how her kit functions. Now, Gara has one really kind of neat ability. There's a chance when she's in the sunlight that she will actually blind nearby enemies when she moves. As you can see, there it is. Enemies become blinded when she touches sunlight. It's a pretty cool mechanic actually, and it can happen quite often. It's super, super useful. Boom. So now her first ability, as I will showcase here, is called Shattered Lash. Now Shattered Lash is a 10-meter range, so it's not a great range, but it has a pretty good damage. The radius is very short, however. Just constantly stunning them. Now one of the cool things about her first ability is it actually scales off the mods on her melee weapon, which I'll showcase later. So right there just did 400 damage. They got down. They're unhappy. But beyond that, that's all you can do. Now, her second ability creates an aura of glass, the Splinter Storm. You stand near people, they take damage, and there you go. You have 250 damage per second. Kind of a neat little thing right there, right? It only has a very small area of effect, however. So, look at her abilities. For example, you'll see that the range is 30 meters, that you can cast it on enemies or allies, by the way. But the radius itself is only 2.5 meters, so it's a fairly short-ranged effect. Its duration is 22 seconds for me. It is a 70% damage reduction, but when I cast it on enemies, it increases their damage by 35%. And I'll showcase that here. So normally the Astella apparently one-shots enemies at level 30. Maybe I have mods on it. Oopsie. Thought I took all the mods off. I'm sorry. Yeah, there's mods on that. Anyways, so we'll go back to this. We'll simulate them again. I want to bring in some more Lancers than just the 2, so we'll buff it up to... We'll actually keep it at 20. We'll do 20, because then they'll just pop up everywhere. We can just kind of use them to our heart's content. So, normal does about 40 or 20. If I cast my Glass Storm on it, first of all, he starts dealing damage to the allies around him. On top of that, as you can see, he takes a slightly increased amount of damage. The next effect is this one. Now, Spectre Rage is an ability that's kind of annoying because it doesn't work unless the enemies are actually actively able to attack. But it creates a duration of 22 seconds. It creates a ring of a carousel of mirrors that the enemies have to attack. And when they are destroyed, the enemies damage... No, the mirrors damage their enemies, which I will showcase in a little bit as well. Gara's final ability is Mass Vitrify, which basically is this. Turns enemies into glass. Now, one of the kind of interesting things about Gara's Vitrify, and I'll show you the ability itself, so it's a max radius of 11 meters, it has a health, so it's kind of like Frost Bubble, that does about 2.2 thousand damage, it drains 5 energy per second. The multiplier is 1.5 times, so this is the amount of damage it deals that you deal extra to vitrified enemies. The effect lasts for 16 seconds, the explosion range is 15 meters, and the explosion damage is 800, which if I had some energy, I would showcase. But I do not. So I'll go get some energy quick, and then I'll explode it. So You can explode her wall in two ways. One is by tapping the first ability, like that, or you can slash it, which does even more. So now if I cast this ability, normally enemies would be only blinded for a few seconds, but because they're inside this ring, and because they were vitrified, the status effects on these targets become frozen in time until they leave. Until they leave the glass, and then the effect disappears. Which of course is kind of heavily dependent on whether or not I've just blinded them again. Oof. So, kind of a cool set of skills, on top of the fact, you know, she has a couple different ways she can run. Now, we're going to kill some more, actually, because I have more to kill. And I'm going to show you Gara's #1 benefit, which of course is the fact that her first ability gains power from her melee mods. So on here, I'm going to put on a prime pressure point, and I'll throw on buzzkill, and I'll throw on. I need more stuff. That, because it has to be pure damage mod. That's the biggest difference. It has to be just pure on unadulterated damage mods. Anything else will not work for you. Okay, so I threw on some mods, right? Now I'm going to show you what it can do to these enemies. So as you saw before, it was about 400 damage I dealt. Now it's 8,000, and they just got sliced in half. So one of the things that makes a really big difference to Gara is how you mod the melee weapon she's using. And it can use riven mods, legendaries, anything specific, so it's really variable. But that's why a lot of Gara players will actually run her, not with the Volnus, which is a good weapon, I will admit, but instead with the Jaw Sword. And I'll explain in a second why. So the Jaw Sword has the ability that it can use the Blade of Truth, which is 100% melee damage. It can still use Prime Pressure Point, like everything else can, and it can use Spoiled Strike, which also does more damage and more slash, and of course, Riven mods. But because of Blade of Truth, it is an additional 100% melee damage multiplier, which brings the amount of damage this weapon can do to crazy high amounts of damage. So throw that on there for an extra little bit, and I will show you exactly what I mean by that. So we have another group of enemies over here. So before you saw 8,000 damage go down. That's 20,000 damage. Which again, goes to show just how much the difference in having a good set of mods on your weapon are. Now, Gara's tap is puncture, her press and hold is slash. So if you break her, so if you're using her tap, it gains more damage from impact mods. Where if you're dealing more, or if you're doing her slash, it deals more damage if you do slash mods. So if you watch here, I mean, it still does 17,000, but this does 20,000. So the difference between one set of Gara's abilities and the other is heavily dependent on what mods you put on her melee weapon. But as you can see, she can just slice through enemies of any kind. And we're just going to kind of take these guys out real quick. And then we're going to bring them all up to level 100, and I'll show you just how nasty this can be. There it is. Alright. So we'll bring these enemies up to level 100, and we'll showcase... Actually, we'll bring them up to max, 135. We'll show you exactly how much power Gara truly has, just because of what she is. And there's a whole other set of things I have to show off as well. So that's 23,000 damage. And you can tell it doesn't deal a whole bunch of their health bar, but it's still pretty darn nasty. And look at that, 37,000, 38,000, well 38,000 damage because they have armor. And armor effects, of course. It's going to sleep you guys off. There we go. But considering that I have not, in any way, shape, or form, added mods to Gara's abilities, makes it kind of ridiculously strong. Or at least that's what a lot of people say. So we'll go ahead and re-energize. There we go. And we're going to mod Gara slightly. But actually, before we do that, I'm going to show you her greatest combination of skills. So, a lot of people know that her second ability, Splinter Storm, is pretty cool, right? But did you know that her Splinter Storm can be, if you watch the timer down here, it ends 14:13, if you hit your fourth ability, it actually refreshes the timer on your second ability. I mean, you don't have to cast it again. And if you're standing outside the wall rather than inside the wall, the damage amount the shield that the auras now does is greatly increased. So it's one of those things, that's the basic combination that makes Gara so darn strong. The more powerful she can get her skills off, so the longer she can keep her Splinter Storm up, the more time she can cast this ability, and I'll showcase that now. It can just keep going up. Unlike people like Nyx, who can absorb a lot of damage and get stacked up, or Equinox that can build up her own damage, and I'm pretty sure I'm missing someone else. Gara can scale the fastest into super high, crazy amounts of damage. On top of the fact that she has 70% damage reduction, which makes her even stronger than the average. So we'll bring up to about 150,000 damage per second. And then we'll head out and I'll show you just how much that destroys enemies even at this high level. And yes, it is a very viable strategy to actually jump into a bunch of enemies, match Vitrify, and kill them all. Now I will admit, these are Lancers, they don't have the highest amount of armor in the game, but at 150,000 damage per second, which does take some time to build up, as you saw, I was able to nearly one-shot enemies of that caliber. Again, this is on an unmodded frame. If I modify Gara, she has a couple different ways that she can be played. She can be played for high duration, which would give her the most amount of time on her storm, which is what sometimes I play with. In this case, it gives me 67 seconds on my storm, but it gives me a fairly low range, and it matters even worse. My energy consumption is pretty darn extensive. But if you have the right kind of setup, you can actually make that play out. But if you also notice, having those mods is greatly affecting how much damage I'm picking up from my skills. Or you can do something, and if you notice my efficiency is at 80%, 124 and 145. Or you can do more range, or you can do kind of an even balance between everything. And this case this is a whole different reason why I'm using this. Now, for a more economy level of build, I can't really show it to you because I have changed Gara so much. Usually Gara's polarity for her aura is rejuvenation. So it's the Vizarin. But I don't have that. I have a V. Now you want the V because of Steel Charge. Steel Charge gives you increased melee damage, which actually affects your Shattered Lash. So it's actually useful to have. Beyond that, you'll probably want to run Intensify, and you will want to run Continuity. If you have it, you might even run Rage. Now for your other ones, you'll probably want to get yourself some Flow. You'll probably want to get yourself Stretch, because you'll probably have Stretch, or you should have Stretch. Once again, Augur Reach. Augur Message, because having that increased duration is just going to make things easier for you. And of course, you can also run things like Streamline to make yourself have a little bit more efficiency with your power. Again, this is more of an economy build than what I normally run. As you can see, I have a huge amount of capacity in this frame. Now, for a true super range, you're going to want to have a little bit of a different layout. First of all, I put on Prime Continuity. I don't use Intensify. I use Blind Rage for that extra power strength. I use Overextended to have that reduced, but to give my increased range to myself. And then I use Cunning Drift for the increased range. And then my last little skill, I can do a couple different things here. Most of what I try to do is I try to increase my duration as much as I can. So, of course, I'll use Augur Message and Constitution for my 207. Fun story, I can even put on... Should let me do that. I will normally put on Power Drift here, and I might even get rid of this to put in Mending Splinters. Usually I don't. Mending Splinters is Gara's only augment right now, but it gives her a heal effect, a regeneration effect, which is super, super useful. So this is the normal build and loadout that I have for Gara in this particular frame and setting. Now, of course, I can change that. I can kick that back down to Intensify, but the problem is I will be under that 100%, and even under the 130%, which I actually need in order to make it viable. And even with Transient Fortitude, which is another one of those rare mods, I still am underneath that. So, unfortunately, however much I don't like to, I have to use Blind Rage to make this build actually work out. So, Gara kind of goes for either a heavy duration or a heavy range skill, but she mostly focuses on keeping her power strength at about 130 plus. If she can do that, she gets a really fast build-up, and the more range she has, the more area of effect she has, of course, as you'll see. So, without mods, this is our stats. With mods, this is our stats. Splinter Storm goes up to 7 meters. That doesn't sound like a lot of meters, but it's actually quite a bit of range. The damage reduction to 90%, the multiplier is up to 1.5, and it brings the damage multiplier for Match Vitrify almost up to 2 times. Well, it's 1.75, so 75% increased damage. All this kind of plays into the fact that Gara becomes exceptionally strong. She doesn't need weapons so much as she just needs a melee weapon she can rely on, and maybe a fast-acting secondary to pop through Nullify Rebels, if that's the case. But with that, she becomes incredibly strong. But it really doesn't come down to how much power strength you have. It comes down to what's your range and what's your duration. Because the longer duration, it's the more time that you can spend with your ability up without having to restore it. As you can see, a lot of energy consumption in this frame. So I'll quickly jump out of here. I'll show you where you can pick up Gara, which most of you people will probably already know, but we'll just make sure that people do. Gara can be acquired, her blueprint, it cannot be acquired through the normal way of getting it through here. You in fact actually have to go to Cetus. Now Cetus is on Earth, it's a little place, it's been recently known because it's the first open world expansion in Warframe. Big area, and supposedly the next one's going to be even bigger. But Cetus, you have to talk, once you get to, I think, Mastery rank 3 or 4, you can talk to Kanzu. Now, Kanzu is if you don't understand fast travel, which you should. Fast travel is important. You just go to Kanzu. Kanzu will have an option called Seiya's Vigil. And when you do all of Seiya's Vigil as a quest, you get Gara's blueprint at the end. Otherwise, to get her parts, you go to doing all the low missions. This one gives you her chassis, this one has a chance of giving you her systems, and this one has a chance of giving you her neuropics. Now, that's important to get a hold of, because each one of those 3, you can get them before you even do Seiya's Vigil. But you do them and you build them, and unfortunately Gara requires some special materials from out in the plains, including some fish, which you have to go fishing for, and some mined minerals, which you have to go mining for. But beyond that, Gara is well worth the time to invest into her. As you can see, I spent a lot of time investing into her for Forma and for mods. So once again, everyone, I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. If you have, leave a like in the comment section. Leave a like and leave a comment in the comment section. Subscribe if you can. If you didn't like it, if you have some concerns or some worries or whatever, let me know in the comment section as well, or get a hold of me through some, like either through my Facebook or through my Twitter. Until next time, everybody, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and thank you so much for watching. Bye, everybody.